Picture this: you're sitting at Christmas dinner with your husband's family. Everything seems normal, and then your sister Minus and Mice Law hands you a beautifully wrapped gift. You open it, expecting maybe some perfume or jewelry, and instead you find divorce papers, already signed by your husband. She looks you dead in the eye and says, "He belongs with me now." That's exactly what happened to me last Christmas. But here's the thing, Minus, I saw it coming from miles away, and I had already prepared my own little surprise. My name's Sarah, and I thought I had the perfect marriage. Ryan and I had been together for 8 years. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but I genuinely believed we were building something real together. I trusted him completely, maybe too completely. His sister Sophie had always been a problem, though. And when I say sister, I mean his childhood best friend who might as well have been family. She'd known him since they were kids, long before I came into the picture, and she made it crystal clear from day one that she didn't approve of me. Sophie had this infuriating habit of inserting herself into everything we ignored: our date nights, our vacation plans, even our arguments. She'd show up unannounced, call during dinner, and somehow always needed Ryan's help with something urgent. Looking back, I should have seen the red flags much earlier. But love makes you blind, doesn't it? For months leading up to that Christmas, Ryan had been different. Distant. He'd come home late with vague excuses about work stress, guard his phone like it contained state secrets, and there was this weird tension whenever Sophie was around. She'd got a nest mugger giving me these little knowing smiles that made my skin crawl. Something was definitely wrong, but I didn't have proof yet. That night, we were all gathered in Ryan's parents' living room after dinner, minus me, Ryan, Sophie, and his parents. The Christmas tree was twinkling, everyone was exchanging gifts, and the atmosphere felt normal. Or at least I thought it did. Then Sophie handed me that box. It was wrapped in elegant silver paper with a perfect bow, and she had this strange smile on her face as she said, "Open it, Sarah. I think you're really going to love this one." I unwrapped it carefully, and at first my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. It was a stack of legal documents. Divorce papers. And there, clear as day, was Ryan's signature at the bottom. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My hands began to shake as I stared at those papers, trying to make sense of what was happening. I looked up at Ryan, expecting him to explain, to tell me this was some sick joke. But he just sat there, staring at the floor, his jaw clenched tight. He wouldn't even look at me. That's when Sophie delivered the killing blow: "He belongs with me now." The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan's mother's mouth fell open, her eyes darting between all of us in confusion. His father just shook his head and let out this heavy sigh, like he'd been expecting something like this. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach and knocked all the air out of my lungs. But instead of breaking down, instead of crying or screaming like they probably expected, I took a deep breath and steadied myself. You see, I'd been planning for this moment for months. I looked Sophie right in the eye and smiled. "Well then, you're absolutely going to love my gift." I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Sophie's smug expression faltered slightly as I handed it to her. I could see the curiosity in her eyes mixed with just a hint of fear. She opened it slowly, and the moment she saw what was inside, she let out this blood-curdling scream that made everyone jump. And that's when everything exploded. Sophie's scream wasn't just surprisiness, it was pure, wrought error. She immediately clamped her hand over her mouth like she was trying to stuff the sound back in, but it was too late. Everyone was staring at her now. Ryan shot up from his chair. "What did you do?" His voice was sharp, but I could hear the panic underneath. Sophie was flipping through the papers frantically, like maybe they'd change if she looked at them fast enough. Her hands were trembling, her breathing uneven. I didn't say a word. I just watched. Sophie turned to Ryan with wild eyes. "You told me you fixed this." "Fixed what?" Ryan's mother demanded, finally finding her voice. Nobody answered her. Ryan snatched the papers from Sophie's hands, and the moment he saw what was inside, all the color drained from his face. Good, because that envelope contained much more than just proof of their affair. That was only the beginning. Let me back up and explain how I figured all this out. I knew something was wrong months before I had any concrete proof. Ryan's behavior had changed completely. He was coming home later and later, always with some excuse about work deadlines. He'd started guarding his phone obsessively, taking it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. But it was Sophie's behavior that really tipped me off. She'd always been territorial about Ryan, but lately she'd gotten downright smug. She'd give me these little, knowing looks, like she had some secret that I wasn't in on. It made my skin crawl. So I started investigating. At first, I just checked his phone when he was sleeping. Nothing there minus he'd gotten smart about deleting messages. Then I decided to look at our finances. We had joint bank accounts, joint credit cards, the whole married couple setup. That's where I found the first real evidence. Money was disappearing. Thousands of dollars, slowly but steadily draining out of our accounts. At first, I thought maybe he was gambling or having an affair with some random woman. But then I started looking at where the money was going. Payments to Sophie. I felt physically sick when I saw her name on those transaction records. But I didn't confront them. Instead, I got smart about it. I hired a private investigator. Best money I ever spent. What he uncovered made my stomach turn. Ryan wasn't just cheating on me with Sophie minus, he was systematically stealing from me. I own a small boutique marketing firm. It's my life's work, something I built from absolutely nothing. And Ryan had been forging my signature on business documents, transferring money out of our accounts, even taking out loans in my name. Sophie wasn't just the other woman his eyes, she was his accomplice. They had it all planned out. They'd already signed a lease on a condo in Miami, paid for with my stolen money. They were going to take everything I'd worked for and disappear together. When I saw all the evidence laid out in front of me, I sat in my office for what felt like hours, just staring at those papers. I felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I got to work. Back in that living room, Ryan was still holding the papers, his hands shaking visibly. Sophie looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. I crossed my legs and leaned back in my chair. "You should keep reading," I said calmly. He did, and his eyes went wide with horror. Because the next page was a legal notice for my attorney. I was suing them both for fraud, identity theft, and embezzlement. I had everything minus Ryan's forged signatures, records of the stolen money, copies of their property lease, everything. Ryan's mother snatched the papers from his hands, scanning through them quickly. I watched her face go from confusion to horror to pure rage. She turned to Sophie. "Tell me this isn't true." Sophie couldn't even look at her. Ryan finally found his voice. "You can't do this. We're married. That money is minus." I cut him off. "No, Ryan. My money. My business. My name that you forged. You stole from me." My voice was perfectly calm and controlled, but inside I was burning with fury. Ryan shook his head frantically. "We can fix this. Let's just talk about this privately minus." "No," I stood up. "No more secrets. No more whispers behind my back. You wanted to make this public by humiliating me in front of your family? Fine. Now it's your turn." I reached into my purse and pulled out one final card minus a USB drive. I handed it to Ryan's father. "Plug this into the TV." Sophie let out a strangled no, but it was way too late. The television screen lit up, and suddenly the whole family was watching security footage from a hotel lobby. There was Ryan, clear as day, with Sophie. Kissing her, holding her hand, walking into a hotel room together. Ryan's mother gasped and covered her mouth. His father's face turned bright red with anger. Sophie covered her face with her hands. Ryan just stood there, completely frozen. I looked at both of them and said, "Merry Christmas." But I still wasn't done. Ryan grabbed the papers back from his mother, flipping through them desperately. "Where the hell did you get all this?" I tilted my head and smiled. "I don't think that's the question you should be asking, Ryan." His hands were shaking as he got to the next page. That's when the real panic set in. Because it wasn't just civil charges for fraud and theft. There was an arrest warrant attached. You see, while I was gathering evidence with my private investigator, we discovered something I hadn't expected. Ryan and Sophie weren't just stealing from me minus, they were laundering money. Apparently, Ryan had gotten involved in some shady real estate deals, flipping properties with unreported cash. At first, I thought it was just him being stupid, but then we found Sophie's name on some of the contracts too. That's when it hit me minus, they weren't just screwing me over personally. They were breaking federal laws. So I made a phone call to the IRS, and another one to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Ryan took a step backward, shaking his head. "This isn't real. This can't be real." Sophie looked like she was about to faint. "You wouldn't actually minus." I leaned forward. "Oh, but I did." Ryan's father grabbed the papers, reading through them with increasing horror. His mother gasped when she saw the charges listed. That's when Ryan bolted for the door. And that's when we heard the sirens. You see, I'd spent weeks working with a team of lawyers and federal investigators. By the time we were done building the case, This wasn't just a civil matter anymore, minus it was criminal. Turns out, when you forge someone's signature on business documents and steal their money, banks take that very seriously. So do the feds. I'd given them everything minus every bank transaction, every forged signature, every fraudulent contract. And they told me that Ryan and Sophie were already under investigation for the money laundering. My evidence was just the missing piece they needed to make arrests. The lawyer had looked at me and said, "If this goes forward, your husband could be facing serious jail time." I'd smiled and said, "Good." Red and blue lights flashed through the living room windows. Ryan froze in the doorway. Sophie let out a choke sob. Ryan's mother put a shaking hand over her mouth. No, this can't be happening." Ryan turned to me, desperation in his voice. "Please, Sarah. Please. We can fix this." I stood up and grabbed my coat. "You should have thought about that before you decided to steal from me." There was a firm knock at the door. Sophie collapsed onto the floor crying. Ryan looked like he was about to run. Big mistake. The knock echoed through the house, cutting through the tense silence like a knife. Ryan stood frozen in the doorway. Sophie's breathing came in ragged gasps. Ryan's mother clutched her chest like she might faint, and his father's jaw was clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. Another knock, this time followed by a voice Charleston PD. "Open the door." I turned to Ryan, arms crossed. "Are you going to get that? Or should I?" For the first time that night, Ryan looked genuinely afraid. Sophie shot to her feet, gripping his arm. "You promised me this wouldn't happen." Her voice cracked with desperation. Ryan shook her off roughly. "Shut up, Sophie. That was a mistake." Her face twisted into something ugly, and she let out a sharp, wild laugh. "Oh, don't you dare act like this is all on me." Ryan's father stepped between them. "Someone better start explaining what the hell is going on here." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. So I did it for them. Ryan and Sophie had been sleeping together. Gasps rippled through the room. Ryan flinched like I'd slapped him. Ryan's mother's knees buckled. No, that can't be true." She turned to Sophie, almost pleading. "Tell me that's not true." Sophie didn't answer. She just lowered her head, her shoulders shaking. That was all the confirmation Ryan's mother needed. She broke down sobbing. "You were family, Sophie. You were his sister Minos in minus law." Sophie whispered something too quiet to hear. I stepped closer. "Speak up." She lifted her head, her eyes burning with hatred. "I've always loved him." A sick, twisted confession that made everyone in the room recoil. The knocking at the door became more insistent. "Oh, I think this is exactly the time," I said. "Because Ryan didn't just cheat. He stole from me. He laundered money. He put everything in my name and thought he could just disappear and start over." I turned to Sophie. "With you?" Ryan's father looked disgusted. I walked over and opened the door. Two police officers stood there with serious expressions. "Ryan Carter?" Ryan turned white as a sheet. The officers stepped inside. "Mr. Carter, we have a warrant for your arrest. You're being charged with fraud, identity theft, and financial misconduct." Ryan panicked. He tried to run, but he barely made it past the hallway before one of the officers tackled him to the ground. Sophie screamed, scrambling after them. "Stop. You don't understand. This is her fault." I let out a laugh-mobile, genuine laugh. "Oh, this should be good." Sophie turned on me, her face red and streaked with tears. "You're the reason he had to do this. You never made him happy. You were selfish. You minus..." Ryan's mother's hand connected with Sophie's face so hard it echoed through the room. Everyone froze. Sophie stumbled backward, stunned. Ryan's mother's chest was heaving, her face wet with tears. "How dare you," she said, her voice shaking with pure rage. "How dare you stand here in my house and act like you're the victim?" Sophie whimpered, but Ryan's father cut her off. "Shut up." His voice was dangerous. He turned to Ryan, who was now being handcuffed on the floor. "You're no longer my son." Ryan actually laughed minus a bitter, desperate sound. "Oh, please, spare me the dramatics, Dad. You never gave a damn about me anyway." His father's eyes darkened. "You did this to yourself." Ryan looked around desperately. "Mom, please." She shook her head, crying. "I don't know who you are anymore." The officer started leading Ryan toward the door. That's when Sophie completely lost it. She lunged at me. "This is your fault. You ruined everything." I stepped aside calmly, letting her fall flat on her face. "No, Sophie. I just made sure you paid for it." One of the officers helped her up. She's not under arrest, but I'd suggest she leaves before she makes things worse for herself. Sophie tried to shake them off, sobbing. Ryan, tell them it was all her fault. But Ryan wasn't looking at her anymore. He just stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. He wasn't going to save her. Ryan was taken away in the back of a police car. Sophie collapsed on the couch, wailing, but nobody comforted her. I turned to my in-laws. Ryan's mother wiped her face, her eyes swollen from crying. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I nodded. I wasn't angry at them, meanness, they'd been just as blindsided as I was. I grabbed my coat. I should go. Sophie laughed bitterly from the couch. Yeah, run away. Just like you always do. I walked over to her and crouched down so only she could hear me. I won. Her face crumpled completely. I walked out, leaving her in her misery. Rion ended up taking a plea deal. He got 5 years in federal prison. Sophie tried to fight me in court, but she had nothing left. She lost everything minus her job, her apartment, her reputation. I sold the house and moved to New York. My business is doing better than ever. And for the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy. So thank you, Sophie. Thank you for showing me exactly who you both really were. And thank you for giving me the motivation to destroy you both completely. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people face the consequences of their own actions.